Hi, if Samsung is good at anything, it is experimenting. Something we've seen, for example, in their frame TVs that are indeed technically less superior to most other TVs on the market, but still flies off the shelves like butter because of the art feature. There's also the somewhat related music frame speaker that I've tested a while back. And now we finally have the latest, perhaps not as quirky though, but a little creation, the Samsung Music Studio 5. So what's this? Well, basically it's a fairly conventional Bluetooth and Wi-Fi speaker that works either on its own for single or multi-room audio, or works paired with a second Music Studio 5 for the same use case but with proper stereo sound. It, together with another Studio 5, can also be used as TV speakers, mainly for a compatible Samsung TV, but also through the use of the optical in if you are willing to fiddle with that. The Music Studio 5 is also the little sibling to the larger Music Studio 7, which offers more sound, extra features like HDMI ARC, and a higher price tag at that. So how does the Music Studio 5 hold up, and is it perhaps time for Sonos and Denon to make some room? Let's start with the outside, where the Music Studio 5 doesn't really resemble anything else on the market and goes kind of its own way with a pretty unusual design that barely hints that it is actually a speaker we're looking at, which also seems to be a little bit of the point of the design, where the speaker is supposed to blend in rather than stand out. And well, I do kind of think Samsung pulled it off here, although looks are always subjective, but it does look nice, and the wife approval factor is apparently also on par. Materials, however, does feel a bit plastic, especially considering the fairly hefty price tag of just shy of $300. Also, despite looking pretty petite in marketing photos, this is by no means a tiny speaker. Instead, it is just over 5.4 inches, 13.7 centimeters, and weighs about 5.3 pounds or 2.4 kgs. I also can't really make any sense of why Samsung didn't build the power brick into the actual speaker, especially since there's basically even a cutout for it in the bottom of the speaker, Nintendo 64 style. Sure, the power brick is easy to replace if it breaks like this, but the tangle of cables doesn't exactly match the rest of the otherwise clean aesthetic. Well, controls consist of 5 touch buttons up the top, where the volume buttons does make sense, but the rest, that is switching inputs, play, pause, and toggling the built-in microphones, aren't particularly easy to understand initially, although once learned they do work, but yeah, it's still touch buttons. Alright, so the Music Studio 5 works both as a standalone speaker on Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, and has got support for both Spotify Connect, AirPlay, Tidal Connect, and also sports built-in Chromecast functionality. There's even an optical input on the bottom for wired sources. 2 units can, like mentioned, be paired as a wireless stereo pair, either for music or to be connected to a compatible Samsung TV via the SmartThings app or the optical input. Wirelessly connecting the speaker here also unlocks Samsung's Q Symphony feature, where you can combine the TV's built-in speakers with 2 Music Studio 5 units for an even fuller sound. In my case though, I am unfortunately yet to test this, since I only have gotten one speaker to try and not a Samsung TV. So this video will focus mostly on the solo listening experience. However, I also did this to at least get a bit of an idea of how the speaker handles TV sound and the left and right channels on its own, for largely loose scientific purposes and obviously not home decor ones. Setup as a music speaker or as a TV speaker is made using the Samsung SmartThings app, which is fairly painless, at least in my case, and was including a software update done in about 10-15 minutes. Here the app offers a few preset sound profiles plus a simple but effective EQ, making adjusting the sound to your own liking relatively simple. The interface of the app is okay, however it is starting to feel a bit dated. Sound-wise, the Music Studio 5 contains a 4-inch woofer and 2 tweeters, with some AI processing stuff on top of that to optimize the sound. And honestly, it sounds good. The bass is really punchy and the whole listening experience is both warm and very natural. The soundstage and width from my single unit is also perfectly solid, although a stereo pair would absolutely make the experience even better. The speaker also gets impressively loud without much notable distortion. So as for sound, whether it's calmer music, bass, or more mid-happy rockish tunes, it does work surprisingly good. So what about the TV part then? Well, here the Music Studio 5 actually supports Dolby Atmos. It does, however, lacks actual up-firing speakers, so it has to rely on software instead. And whilst there might be a tiny bit of height sense here, don't expect any jaw-dropping experiences. Not from a stereo pair either, I can imagine. Big Brother Studio 7 though actually has a dedicated Atmos speaker, making that one, at least on paper, a better deal if that's what you're looking for. What I can say though from my pretty sketchy TV test with a single Studio 5 here is firstly that the dialogue sound is really clear, poppy and easy to listen to, something that also goes for the rest of the sound from movies, etc. The stereo experience is, well, okay for a single speaker. However, with another speaker on the other side of the TV, I reckon it would work pretty well in combination with a Samsung TV. Also, one little catch with this somewhat stupid setup is that you can't control the TV volume through an optical cable. Here you instead need to rely on the app or the speaker itself. So a wireless connection to a compatible Samsung TV is, in my opinion, basically a must here. Or perhaps the step up to the Studio 7 that does support HDMI ARC and lets you control the volume directly with your TV remote. So who should buy the Music Studio 5 then? Well, you are paying a little bit extra for the design, I reckon, but the sound does indeed hold up really well. And if you want a sleek, modern looking speaker, it is a pretty interesting option. For directly competing with other multi-room speakers though, the price is a little high, and the Music Studio 5 probably makes the most sense if you're already into the Samsung ecosystem and using a Samsung TV or soundbar, for example, or of course if you indeed are planning to go all in on using Samsung's speakers for a multi-room music setup. Alright, those are my thoughts on the Samsung Music Studio 5. Please share any of your thoughts or questions in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. Thank you for watching. Bye.